Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this week's edition of the Sunday Wire. I'm your host, Patrick Henningsen. We are streaming out live on the Alternate Current Radio Network, also on 21stCenturyWire.com. We're also streaming out live on X, YouTube, Rumble, BitChute, Facebook Live, and a few other audio streams as well that we're working on. But thank you for joining us for this weekly Omnibus News and Analysis radio program. This is episode 535 of the Sunday Wire, so it's great to have you with us. We've got a few of our team members here at ACR is going to join us in a moment, and in the final segment of Overdrive, we'll also hopefully be joined by Basil Valentine, our roving correspondent for culture and sport, for some commentary on other stories. But we're going to start off this week's discussion with the big news. Of course, the Munich Security Conference broke ground this week. This is sort of the Davos of defense, if you will. Very interesting event. And also, I want to point people to a great breakdown on this and the analysis of it we did with a space on X last night. One of our guests on this program today, Adam Clark, aka Ruckus, joined me to co-host this space. Incredibly informative. We managed to go for unbelievably, the time flew, 4 hours and 55 minutes, but it was a great discussion. We had Simon Dixon, who's an incredible advocate for Bitcoin. He came on to give financial analysis. We had a few other great guests that popped in, including Ryan Dawson, who came on for the final hour, and we kind of just went through pretty much everything. So this was very well attended. As you can see, 24,000 have already tuned in, so it was pretty good space on Saturday evening. We try to do that weekly, although not every week, but we try our best. So you can catch us there as well on X. That's in my feed. Just scroll down at 21 Wire, and you'll see that epic space there. Trump, JD Vance. JD Vance's Munich, Zinger, and Europe's demise. And boy, did we break it all down. I want to bring on to the stage right now Adam Clark, aka Ruckus, and Bryan McClain, aka Hesher, joining us right now on the live link. Gentlemen, great to have you with us.
Good morning.
Yeah, good morning. Great to be here.
So the big reveal in Europe as things in Ukraine are being sort of organized by the new incoming Trump administration, and JD Vance's speech as the vice president. That was the big anticipated one. We'll go through. I've got some clips earmarked for that, but we also had a bunch of other stuff happening on the side. So like how they were billing this is, and we'll put that back up on screen, the Davos of defense, that's how they sort of bill it in Europe. As you can see, Zelensky's front and center there in the marketing. This is an aerial shot here. I think that was a photo from 2024, but they led with that in all of their sort of communications. So it's all about Zelensky. So you can see that Europe is pretty lost in terms of like their purpose in the world. It's just all about Ukraine and Zelensky and being against Russia. That's pretty much it. This is how we're billing the Munich Security Conference this year. We're calling it the Love Boat Baltic Cruising. You can see the new Secretary General there, Mark Rutte, having a right jolly with the man in the little green suit, Vladimir Zelensky, the pint-sized dictator. He's front and center, fresh off a false flag, you guys. I don't know if you caught this or not, but the day before Munich Security Conference, as if by magic, a drone attack against the Chernobyl reactor. Dormant reactor, but one of the sarcophagus that's containing the Chernobyl disaster in Ukraine. And there was an attack, and Zelensky comes up to the podium. Putin has done it again. Nuclear terrorism. He is desperate to keep this war going. Give me more cash. Give me more weapons. It's the second year in a row he's done this, where there's been a magical event the night before Munich, and then Zelensky comes up there puffing his chest out, Slava Ukraini style, begging for support. What do you think, guys? Do you think the Russians tried to sabotage these epic peace negotiations on the eve of Munich? Would the Russians do that? And why aren't more people calling this out? I have my suspicions, but did you guys manage to catch that?
Yeah. What's the deal with that? And what was it last time? Wasn't it a nuclear facility last time they were flying drones at?
They did, but that was in Zaporizhia. But last year it was a children's hospital that was hit
Yeah, okay.
by probably an errant anti-aircraft missile fired by Ukraine. So, but Zelensky came to the conference, made a big appeal on that, and there he is, giving it all that. And that's kind of the shtick, folks. It hasn't changed much. He sort of wants it to keep going. Nobody else does. Well, Europe is trying to, but they can't really do. Aren't they in a funny position, the Europeans, guys?
Yeah.
So I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that. I'm going to play the Vance speech in a minute, but go ahead and jump in.
Well, I mean, the American people aren't interested in it. It's kind of funny to see, them trying to raise the dog and pony show, the pomp and circumstance again, when American interest in the conflict has completely faded. I mean, even I don't even see people on the left cheerleading for it anymore. So, what is the goal here? Is the goal here to just move the majority of the funding for this to European countries, or like, what are we really working on here?
I like your background, Hesher. You've got Captain America. You've got the Shiba Inu Doge mascot, Robert F. Kennedy, and Corella DeVille in the lower, lower, your lower left there. Very nice, a very nice piece of illustration. Oh,
Ruckus
just
set that one up for our last boiler room there. It's a great image.
yeah, I like that a lot. So, Ruckus, what are your thoughts on the goings on at Munich?
Oh, well, I wanted to comment about that was quite the attack that Russia enacted there on the nuclear Chernobyl, was it? Of course, Chernobyl. Nothing bad ever happens at Chernobyl. I'm confused, Patrick. Did I miss the news? Is Russia suffering for weaponry? Why are they resorting to a single drone trying to strike Chernobyl? That's a good sign, isn't it? Maybe Ukraine's winning the war after all. Just kidding. Obviously, I think that was an attempted false flag. I don't know what was going on there. It could have just been like anything. It could have been like maybe a macaque monkey, and they could have said it was a drone. Oh, no, wait, that was Sri Lanka. They took out their entire power grid. That was fun. Yeah, I don't know what's going on with Ukraine and Russia. It's almost like here in America, we feel like we're ready to move on because Trump is back in power and he's ready to seal the deal and make it happen and make the war end. And I think Zelensky's a little afraid of that happening. He recently came out, Zelensky that is, and did well, you noticed that on a couple recent appearances, he's not wearing his green shirt anymore, so that was weird. But he did an interview with somebody, I forget who it was, but he was talking about all of the rich resources and minerals and all of the fun stuff that Ukraine has to offer. And that's the real reason now. We're not fighting for democracy. We're fighting to protect all of these minerals and resources and lithium and plutonium or titanium, whatever it is. We can't let Putin get that, because if he did, he's going to build a drone and attack a nuclear plant, clearly.
Yes, indeed. So yeah, the worst part about this false flag was that there's no reaction from the United States. I mean, that's really embarrassing. Like the world media led with that. Some of the European people sort of bought it, but even some of the European leaders, they didn't mention it that much. Zelensky did, though, and I think this is just really tragic to watch this thing unfold. I mean, it's just such a clown show. But we got the little clip here. This was an interesting one. We'll kind of start with Lindsey Graham made his presence known, of course, had to be there. So and there's nothing important to do in America, so you got to be at Munich to be grandstanding and helping his little friend there. They have quite a amorous relationship, these two. It's a strange relationship. I think the word sugar daddy does come to mind a little bit. Biden is gone, so Zelensky is looking for a new silver daddy, and I think he's probably found one in Lindsey Graham here. And this is a clip, and this is it's good to see going underground, by the way, back on X. Their account was deleted under Elon Musk's new free speech regime, and they had to fight like hell, and there was massive amount of uproar to reinstate going underground. That's Afshin Ratanzi's X account for the show. And like, he's a fantastic, well-known veteran, award-winning journalist, of course. So let's just nuke his account. That's what Elon did. There's no explanation for it, but we're glad to see it back. And so here is Lindsey Graham. I'll play this clip, guys, and this kind of like gives the whole game away. It's not the first time we've heard him say this, but it really just kind of, puts an exclamation mark on the whole diabolical agenda of the proxy war against Russia and Ukraine. Listen to this.
I want to tell you and your people, you're the ally I've been hoping for all my life. Not one American has died defending Ukraine. You've taken our weapons and you've kicked their ass. And I'm very proud to have you as our ally. I want to tell you.
So I don't know where to start, guys. It's just a short clip, but it's very professional and statesman of Lindsey Graham. You took our weapons and we kicked their ass. You kicked their ass. Whose ass did Ukraine kick? Are they winning? And he said we didn't cost us one American life. So what he's saying there is our American blood is too precious to spill over this issue of Russia. But we're happy for you to basically go through, 500,000 or 600,000 of your men for our Western liberal vanity. Essentially, what he's saying there. I mean, is this the most? It's so patronizing. It's almost like we're watching a geopolitical episode of Black Mirror. Here, gentlemen, weigh in if you.
But this is not a proxy war at all. So this, right?
Right. So unbelievable. The gumption.
He's admitting it's a proxy war. First of all, in no uncertain terms, and he's also smearing. He's smearing the names of American soldiers who have died there. That's a lie. He's lying about that. Here's a name: Stephen Zabolinsky. When was this posted? This is back in 22. So this is old. Became the latest American citizen confirmed killed in Ukraine war. I could go on. There are other names. So he's lying about the fact that no Americans have spilled their blood there. I'm sure there's some American families of veterans who might have been upset to hear that.
Yeah, unbelievable. And it doesn't end there. And just everybody's still fawning over Zelensky. It was good that the U.S., besides Graham anyway, that's expected. He is the ultimate silver daddy for what we are calling, and I hate to be cruel and unusual, but like, what is Zelensky other than NATO's rent boy? Because this is kind of like how it's ended up. And here's Mark Rutte again. They're just slopping over him for photo ops, but he's on his way out. He's not popular in his own country. He will flee Ukraine. He will flee either by train, by private jet, or on foot. He will flee the country in the end. It'll be an exit. But he's still trying to suck and pull as much money and military support as he possibly can before there's a negotiated settlement. And I'm thinking to myself, how many Ukrainian men are going to die during this negotiation process? Because what if this drags on for a couple of months? And that's like 20,000, 30,000 men, 40,000 men. Like, where does it end? And do any of these people in Europe have any sort of moral ambiguity or doubts, or do they have any conscience about the policies that they're insisting on and what the actual ramifications of that is going to be in Ukraine? I mean, this is so immoral, the whole atmosphere and the whole discussion over Ukraine, and they just can't decouple themselves from it. And everyone's tying themselves in knots, trying to justify after the fact everything that's happened. And we know it's absolutely the worst possible fraud, probably the biggest military disaster in history, right? In modern times. Like, this is the biggest fraud ever perpetrated. and a whole country has just been thrown under the bus. I mean, it's one thing what the U.S. did to Iraq, shock and all, bombed it, destroyed it. Libya, shock and all, bombed it, chopped it into 3 pieces, doesn't exist anymore. But Ukraine was different. They convinced themselves and the world and Ukraine they needed to fight this war against an unwinnable war on behalf of the West. And they disguised it as, this is for the Ukrainians. They're so brave and they're so feisty, and we're going to give them everything that they want as long as they want to keep on fighting. And so then we're seeing videos of Ukraine recruiters like kidnapping people off the street.
Recruiters.
Yeah, recruiters. So they don't really want to fight. And this guy's not having elections because he knows he's going to lose. And that's what we're backing. I mean, this is like on the level of morality, there is no sort. The bar doesn't get any lower than this. And I look at all these people at these events, just, oh yes, Zelensky, he's champion of democracy. He's fighting the good fight.
Democracy. Yeah. Okay. I'm curious. Why is it there's so much footage available of this conflict? We could say the same about Gaza, but we'll set that aside for a second. Why is there so much footage available? All these GoPros, you search around Telegram and a few other places, repost to TikTok. There is so much footage of what this war looks like, what the combat looks like, what the conscription looks like. We don't see any of that. We don't see any of the mass graves. I've seen mass graves hundreds of times on Telegram. So, there's that. And then there's also the fact that I don't know that we have ever seen in our mainstream media any discussions with Ukrainian soldiers or Ukrainian families of soldiers who have been killed in combat. We don't see any of that. You would think if this was a popular war, we would have footage of the war being shown, analysis of certain battles, and discussions with proud families who are okay with the sacrifice that they've given. We don't see any of that. Like the only sort of piece of context that the American public has, that the entire West has, is politicians talking to Zelensky and Zelensky talking to politicians. That's it. That is it. Like, it would be very easy to prove that this is a winnable war if they really want to push that talking point. It would be really easy to prove that democracy is actually a function that is being preserved here. But they don't have any of that. There's, as far as I can tell, there's no evidence that there's any of that, any national pride in losing their veterans, any sort of humane drafting happening. Rather it's kidnappings and forced conscription, dying in meat grinders, trench warfare, being exploded by consumer grade drones. These are the sort of things that are going on, and we see none of that. We see absolutely none of that. So, and frankly, the American people aren't interested in seeing it. I don't think on either end. They might be interested if it was, if there was evidence to support the narrative, if you will, but they just don't seem to have that. All they have is the comedian, the clown.
Ruckus, we had Anna from Ukraine on the space last night, and she had a lot to say about this. She said that he's not popular at all. Like more than half the country hate him, but it's so repressive in Ukraine. They've got such control over the media, and they've got these neo-Nazi thugs running around, and everyone's afraid to kind of speak out. I mean, it's a terrible atmosphere if you think about it. You're in a dead-end war. You can't win, but you can't really speak out about it for fear of being called a traitor and have neo-Nazi thugs beat you in the street. I mean, that's kind of where Ukraine is at right now. But the scales are going to quickly fall from people's eyes what the U.S. has to do, Russia, is they've got to pull the plug. Like they can't. Trump still hasn't kind of gone all in yet. He said, well, we're going to keep the aid going, but I'm going to take the rare earths. That's his latest brainchild this week. They don't have any oil, so we can't take the oil. We'll take the rare earths. And it's kind of screwed up because that wasn't in the deal of the financial aid from Biden for the last 3 years. So if there's a future proxy war, then what country would want to kind of do business with America? And that's why we're having a special this week on flags. Get 50% off your new Taiwan proxy war flag when you trade it in for your old used Ukraine proxy war profile flag. So get your profiles switched, folks. We'll be moving on to Taiwan or some other sort of conflict somewhere, possibly a war with Iran. We'll talk about that with you guys as well. But like, who would want to do business with the U.S. after this? I mean, yes, Trump's doing the right thing. He's inherited this dead-end war. He's winding it down. But this kind of like the way this is going, it's not going to be good for any future partnership with the U.S., with any of these types of countries. What do you think?
At least he's asking for something in return, because I was thinking, what is the ROI on all of this funding, the return on our investment, as it were? Lindsey Graham seems happy that it's just, we're just killing Russians and we're keeping Putin at bay. Little does he know, I mean, because I know how much of a fan he is about going after Iran. Correct me if I'm wrong, but all of the money, aid, resources, weaponry that we send over to Ukraine is that exact amount less that we're sending to Israel, for instance. So, I don't know how Bibi feels about all this, but the return on the investment, at least Trump is expecting that, okay, listen, we've invested whatever it was, X amount of billions of dollars. We want at least 3 times as much as that back in the form of rare earth minerals. So again, at least he's asking for something in return for the sacrifices that Zelensky's men have done by using our weapons and our money. It's crazy to me. And that Taiwan flag's not going to work on social media, not like the blue and the yellow flag did.
Yeah, that's a little more complicated. They're going to have to change their flag. Someone needs to get in touch with them and make it a little more sort of marketable. The ROI on Ukraine, Biden told us what the ROI was, Ruckus. What are you talking about? It's about defending Western values. That's the ROI. It's preserving Western values and then preventing Putin from marching all the way to the English Channel. That's the ROI. That, according to Joe Biden and NATO and Jan Stoltenberg and all these guys. So, like, freedom and democracy is the ROI, Ruckus. What are you talking about?
And as Americans, we only care about what's happening out there in Europe. It's all we think about every day when we wake up, from morning, noon to night. I mean, in between the job thing and the family and the stress and our own problems, domestic issues. But we're always fretting, wondering about, oh my God, is today the day that Putin marches to the English Channel? We can't let that happen, America. Yeah, it makes no sense to me.
Be honest, Ruckus. Having that Ukrainian flag adorning your profile on Facebook really made you feel good, didn't it? For those first 2 years.
I never had one.
I know you.
I wouldn't do it.
I'm talking rhetorically. I know you did. I know you didn't. But seeing that Ukrainian flag, and if you're in a small town in Texas, and you see the town hall is flying the Ukrainian flag with the American flag, which many of them did. It happened here in the UK. Every little village and hamlet had a Ukraine. Our buses are painted gold and blue with "Donate to Ukraine" on the side. Double-decker buses still running around the UK. I think I shared them. I probably have to, pull those up again. I saw one the other day. I'm just like, when are they going to decommission these things? So, I mean, it's like, it's that feel good. It really gave us a purpose that we were somehow part of something bigger. And isn't that priceless? I mean, that's so intangible that Western values, preserving Zelensky is preserving all that is good about the West. He is the front line. He is the final backstop for our freedoms. What are you guys talking about? You're so cynical. Why aren't you supporting this little man?
Couple of things. First of all, was it in 2022 or 2023? I can't quite remember, but I believe it was the Pentagon or somewhere in the DoD. They admitted that about 70%, because it's not all buckets of cash we're sending over. Let's not forget a lot of this, monetary value, much like aid going to Israel, is in weapons. So, back then, I forget if it was 22 or 23, the DoD admitted that 70% of that stuff, quote, disappears into a black hole after we send it out. Okay, so that was a pretty big warning shot, a pretty big admission by the United States government right there. And now we've got another similar story to that. Zelensky saying, something similar recently. So basically, we have no idea how much fraud, waste, and perhaps even international arms smuggling criminality is associated with this. So if we are truly, doging right now, if we're doging for things, there's some inefficiency going on here, to put it, blandly, with regards to the money and weapons that are going there. So, there's that whole factor. Are we being expedient here? And then, with regard to the idea of democracy, we were talking about this on Boiler Room the other night, and there's an article up at Big League Politics by Shane Trejo that we were talking about. The headline is President Trump cuts off funding for the National Endowment for Democracy, and the NED. Here's a quote from the article: a steady stream of NED grants to myriad Ukrainian political entities and movements advanced both the Orange Revolution and the Maidan Revolution that paved the way for the current Ukraine-Russia war. And an analyst from the Libertarian Institute by the name of Jim Bovard was speaking about this exact concept, the democracy concept. And back in 2009, in an article he wrote for Future of Freedom Foundation, he noted that NED is, quote, based on the notion that its meddling in foreign elections is automatically pro-democracy because the U.S. government is the incarnation of democracy. NED has always operated on the principle that what's good for the U.S. government is good for democracy. And I like the way that he's put that, because that is the only definition of, supporting democracy abroad that makes sense. Because this, if you're using, you would think you could use the definition of the term democracy to analyze that talking point, but you can't, because democracy is not being defended. You've got a dictator there. He has no electoral mandate to be sitting in the seat that he's in right now. He has shut down political parties. He has jailed, tortured, and killed journalists. We could go on about the undemocratic practices there to include everything that NED was funding that led to this situation. So the fact that this administration has shut down NED and still going to these security conferences and kind of big upping, Ukraine's capability in this war leaves a big fat question mark for a lot of people, I think.
Oh, indeed it does. Indeed it does. NED and National Democratic Institute, that's another one of those. Michael McFaul came up, I think the Gray Zone or somebody had retweeted this. It's on my feed, but he got a second salary in there. He's making like $1 million a year. He's got a lifetime job, academic job, and he's glory festooning on X about how much everybody loves him. And he's one of the architects of the coup in Maidan. So these people are responsible for untold death and destruction. These deep state people on all these payrolls, USAID funded, U.S. government, State Department funded, shameless. But so anyway, this is interesting. I believe in reincarnation. So Jan Stoltenberg leaves as Secretary General, and we've got Mark Rutte from Holland, and this Dutch clown, who is really a comedian. He is just as much a spaz as Jan Stoltenberg. You remember Stoltenberg with the hands, like he's Norwegian, but he talks like he's Italian. So this is Rutte here, and these people are so, I don't know, just anodyne and banal. They're absolute Eurocrats, and they're still sitting here trying to make a case while the walls are falling down. The whole thing is collapsing. They're still trying to make a case that they're going to stand for democracy and freedom in Ukraine. So Christiane Amanpour, who I don't have any time for, she's the queen of warmongering, but she's herself is being forced as a CNN big interviewer or whatnot. She's being forced to kind of, conform to reality a little bit over Gaza, and of course on this as well. Here's Mark Rutte, this is just such a funny interview. Notice her jacket, you guys. Notice her jacket, and not to get distracted, but it's almost like Zelensky's a stylist is also doing her wardrobe as well. Look at this. Hold on.
Americans have said it's only the Europeans who they intend to police or whatever, security guarantee any deal. Does that mean you face just Europeans? Is it NATO? What is it? When you think about that, who goes in to patrol any line of contact?
But here's the thing. My worry is that we are now already negotiating with Putin without having Putin yet at the table.
Fine, but that's what the Americans have done. I'm sorry, the defense secretary.
I'm not sure they're doing
he
that.
He said that no American boots on the ground. He said only Europe, and that's what he said.
I think the agreement is this, that whatever the outcome of those talks will be, that Putin should never ever again to try to capture 1 square kilometer, or to say it in American terms, 1 square mile of Ukraine. That is vital. We cannot have a Minsk III. This was the agreement struck after they kept Crimea, after they were able to capture Crimea in 2014, 2015. We can never have that again. So it has to be durable. We all agree on this. And then you and I can brainstorm whatever those security guarantees should be, what it exactly should look like.
These guys make me laugh so hard. And Pete Hegseth used the same talking point out front of NATO headquarters or whatever. I don't know where it was. It was at Munich. No, out front of Munich. He said, we can't have another Minsk 3.0. So this is clearly a talking point that's been circulated. Listen, Minsk was the best deal that Ukraine could have ever got, and it was on the table for 8 years. 8 years. They were never going to get Crimea back, but they would have kept the whole East and avoided a war. So it wasn't like Minsk was a bad deal, and it was a UN Security Council resolution, unanimous. All the US and all the Europeans signed on to it, and they slow-walked it. They slow-walked it intentionally, and that's admitted by Angela Merkel. It's admitted by Francois Hollande, who was a French president at the time. It's admitted by Petro Poroshenko twice, and it's admitted by Zelensky. So they sabotaged the Minsk Accords to have the war. They chose to have the war, but it's the gaslighting is this was Putin's war of choice. How many times have you guys heard that? It's Russia's war of aggression, Putin's unprovoked war of choice. Unprovoked war of choice. So you can see there's a whole script here. This whole conflict is based on a facade of propaganda that there were plenty of off-ramps to avoid a war. And they insisted they needed Russia to intervene on behalf of Donbass, because Donbass was getting shelled and civilians were getting killed by the thousands. And Russia said, that's it. As soon as they started saying Ukraine's going to be in NATO, and Zelensky, in February, Zelensky said, we need nuclear weapons. He said that. And so that's when Russia basically said, okay, we're going in. And these people will stand here like, well, we were just kind of sitting around having tea and everything was perfect. And then Putin came over the ridge with the Russian army. These evil orcs came over into the Shire and just ruined it all, guys. These clowns are something else. Honestly.
what is with the like? This is still a persisting talking point that Russia invaded Crimea. I mean, if anything should tell you that global government does not want people sort of having agency and ownership over what their governance is going to be, that is a great example right there. It's like those are Russians that voted in a referendum basically for that to happen. And then like the balls on this guy to bring up Minsk. Are you kidding me? Like who are the, like you just outlined it, but I mean rhetorically, who are the people that were not following the Minsk agreements? Seems to me that was largely Ukraine operating under CIA directive and visits from senators and Congress people and all this stuff. So I mean, I don't know who who the Secretary General thinks he's talking to there. It's like these talking points aren't even for citizens unless they're completely brainwashed, and the the cadre of brainwashed citizens is getting smaller and smaller and smaller right now. I mean, there's a lot of people that don't get it, but they get it enough to know that they should be very skeptical, and they're probably being propagandized too, which is a vastly different situation than in 2022.
If this guy was a comedian, I would pay money to see him because he is funny. He's genuinely funny. So, but where do they find these people? If you're going to carry on with the NATO charade, might as well have a military guy in charge with the medals. Remember, like Rasmussen, or it just looks better. This civilian, I shop at Macy's look is not cool, and it's not credible at all. So, I mean, it's so long in the tooth. The whole NATO thing, trying to wokeify NATO and then make it gender neutral and make it more kind of, civilian friendly with more women and da 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 da. So it's just too much. So I mean, this Ukraine, I think, is the project that will break NATO. That's how history is going to look back at it. NATO died in Ukraine. NATO died in Ukraine. Ironic, isn't it?
And didn't Trump want to kind of get us out of NATO? Hasn't he been floating this idea again recently? I mean, I know it's okay, everybody. I mean, this doesn't mean anything because Donald Trump can pick up the phone and end the war in 24 hours. I don't know why he's waiting, but that was what he promised us. Remember on the campaign trail, he said he was going to end it before he even took office. Actually, if I'm not mistaken,
it's a little more complicated. Trump's finding out. So what's happened is, and that's why Ruckus freaking out because Europe doesn't really have any say, and he himself is like a nobody because the guys like that don't run NATO. The U.S. runs NATO. NATO is run by Washington, and Britain is its sidekick. It's Batman and Robin. That's NATO. Everybody else is like literally an extra from central casting, and they do what they're told. And if the U.S. says you need to spend 5% of your gross national product on defense and buy from us, they're going to do it. And so unless Europe wakes up and says, oh my God, we're being played here. So like what's happening, guys, is the U.S. is saying up your defense spending, which you're going to buy from us, but we're not going to be there in Ukraine. You can send troops in, but no U.S. troops. And you need to defend yourself. So it's like a protection racket, but without the protection. So it's just like brilliant. It's like the Sopranos not even going to bother protecting your shop, basically. So it's
no, they'll just send a box of weapons over. It's like, here's a box of Tommy guns. Good luck, guys.
Yeah, make sure you buy those guns too from us.
How about a box of gravitic drones with unlimited payload capacity? That would be the ultimate solution. Powered by Starlink, of course.
Right. Yes. We'll have to steal that intel from the Chinese because apparently they've got gravitic drones, which they're launching out of Chinese submarines off the coast of New Jersey. I mean, that's what I heard on the Sean Ryan show. So I'm sure that there's, it must be true because he's very well connected, I'm told. Anyway, so let's, other goings on here. Proloins are out at Munich. Here we go. This is Annalena Baerbock's Twitter account. As you can see, these are the lovely ladies. These are strong women of the free world. Hashtag MSC 2025. And she's tagged here Melanie Jolly. That's the other one. I don't know what country she's from. Probably one of the Baltic states, I'm guessing. And then Kaja Kallas, the blonde bombshell from Estonia, who is in charge of foreign policy. I mean, the Russians must be shaking in their boots, guys. I mean, will you be honest? If you had to go up against these three, these are the strong women of the free world, and they will not be deterred in their quest to advance European and Western values. And Putin is not going to intimidate these women, guys. And as you can see, here we go. So Mats Nilsson, friend of the show, by the way, the great Swedish geopolitical analyst and historian. Matt's added his 2 cents to this. Let's see if it's down here at all. Let me see. I'm not sure. Matt's did a great piece of AI art. I don't know. I'll have to go find it. But he did a great sort of addition to this. I'll see if I can locate it. But what do you think about this? Strong women of the free world, guys. It's pretty
looks more like a book club or something like that, or a country club table. I don't think that the mommy blogger class here in the United States and in the larger West would disagree about the strong women here. I don't think the mommy blogger sphere is going ham right now. They love it. They're thriving on TikTok, they're thriving on Instagram, and they're not putting up with any psyops when they see them, So that's the real strong women right now. So this is sort of, I would say this is like the a straw man of strong women right here. These are basically proxies for warmongers and globalists, and I think pretty much most people realize that.
It almost looks like a stock photo. Like you could use this photo in any setting. Actually, if I was just looking at the picture without knowing who they were or the setting, I would say, what is this, a coven of witches or something? Is this a J.K. Rowling book signing? What is this?
Yeah, Sex and the City, some sort of like Comic-Con for Sex and the City fans, maybe.
Yeah, I was thinking more like an episode of Eurotrash, but I mean, that's just
there you go.
A great British show, by the way. And on that note, we're what we're saying here at the Sunday Wire is in the spirit of Eurotrash. We'll just bring up on screen here the great French host that you would know if you're in Britain, but if you're from France, I'm talking about Antoine de Kooning. There he is, Antoine de Kooning. Make Antoine great again. He was the host of Eurotrash, which was a classic comedy show. I think you could probably catch episodes of it on YouTube, but that was a sort of in the Euro kitsch heyday. I'm talking about the late 1990s, before they sort of formalized the common market and things got a little more civilized. But he was the host of this show. He was absolutely brilliant. One of the funniest guys ever. Antoine, we miss you. Please bring back the show. But that's where Europe is at the moment. On the JD Vance front, let's take a look. Now, this is a really interesting speech, guys. And I'll be honest with you. I was expecting something different. I was expecting some geopolitics. I was expecting him as vice president, because vice president is head of the National Security Council in the U.S. pyramid. And so I was kind of expecting Donald Trump's proxy to come and give a very clear foreign policy direction, but we didn't get that. What we got was anti-wokeism mostly. And it's kind of like the beta male battle there. And I feel like Elon Musk influenced this speech or something. It was all that. There was some good stuff in there, and we'll play some of it. We'll come out of the gates with the positive stuff. And then there was some Daily Shooter script in there as well, which was extremely disappointing. But we'll start with the positive stuff. Obviously, he came after the Europeans on censorship. Personally, though, you got to be careful when you criticize Europe not to humiliate them. You can criticize them and say we were part of the problem as well. He sort of tried to do that a little bit, but not good enough, because the last thing you want to do is have Europe trying to undermine America. And this is kind of like where things are headed. They're having an emergency meeting of the European Council to discuss Donald Trump, and this is on Tuesday or Wednesday, and discuss the NATO situation. So I don't know how that's going to go. Could be a nothing burger, could be something, but we'll take a look at Vance here. Let me see if I can bring this up, and I'll bring this up on screen. So this is JD Vance. Now this is the good stuff here. I support everything here, and we'll get you guys comment on this. So let's start off on a positive note, and I'll work our way through the weeds after that. But here's Vance.
Obvious truth. So I come here today not just with an observation, but with an offer. And just as the Biden administration seemed desperate to silence people for speaking their minds, so the Trump administration will do precisely the opposite, and I hope that we can work together on that. In Washington, there is a new sheriff in town, and under Donald Trump's leadership, we may disagree with your views, but we will fight to defend your right to offer it in the public square, agree or disagree.
Ouch! No one's not many of those guys were clapping. I don't know if you guys picked that up. So there's a very
they had an applause sign. They had to light it up.
Very frosty reaction from the room. So that was interesting. He continues.
Now we're at the point, of course, that the situation has gotten so bad that this December, Romania straight up canceled the results of a presidential election based on the flimsy suspicions of an intelligence agency and enormous pressure from its continental neighbors. Now, as I understand it, the argument was that Russian disinformation had infected the Romanian elections. But I'd ask my European friends to have some perspective. You can believe it's wrong for Russia to buy social media advertisements to influence your elections. We certainly do. You can condemn it on the world stage even. But if your democracy can be destroyed with a few $100,000 of digital advertising from a foreign country, then it wasn't very strong to begin with. Now, the good news is that I happen to think your democracies are substantially less brittle than many people apparently fear. And I really do believe that allowing our citizens to speak their mind will make them stronger still. Which, of course, brings us back to Munich, where the organizers of this very conference have banned lawmakers representing populist parties on both the left and the right from participating in these conversations. Now, again, we don't have to agree with everything or anything that people say. But when when political leaders represent an important constituency, it is incumbent upon us to at least participate in dialogue with them. Now, to many of us on the other side of the Atlantic, it looks more and more like old entrenched interests hiding behind ugly Soviet-era words like misinformation and disinformation, who simply don't like the idea that somebody with an alternative viewpoint might express a different opinion or, God forbid, vote a different way, or even worse, win an election. Now, this is a security conference, and I'm sure you all came here prepared to talk about how exactly you intend to increase defense spending over the next few years in line with some new target. And that's great, because as President Trump has made abundantly clear, he believes that our European friends must play a bigger role in the future of this continent. We don't think, you hear this term, burden sharing, but we think it's an important part of being in a shared alliance together that the Europeans step up while America focuses on areas of the world that are in great danger.
There's a lot to unpack there, but just, what did you guys think? I mean, there's another bit where he said, you probably saw this clip, you guys, what the danger of Europe is the enemy from within. It's the censorship, it's kind of this authoritarian nature of suppressing speech. He's clearly making a play for populism. So he's basically saying you're suppressing populist upswells from the electorate. You're trying to annul election results. So I like the sound of all that, and this is good. I think he was very strong here. Your guys' thoughts, Hesher?
Yeah, I think that's probably why you're hearing some lackluster applause from the crowd there. They a lot of these people there, I would imagine, are completely dyed in the wool when it comes to sort of yesterday's political mindset, if you will. I don't know if I can actually call it that, but so it's there's definitely some good stuff in there, and it makes me think I wish it was a little bit stronger, like if you watch for example Matt Taibbi speaking in front of Jim Jordan just a couple days ago. He did a really good job of unpacking what we've been talking about for a long time, which are all these anti-free speech initiatives and laws that we see in in the UK, in Europe, in Australia, in Canada. He really outlined the censorship situation. He did it concisely. He did it in a 5-minute opener. And, I think that what JD Vance is saying there is the right thing. I just wish he would have gone a little bit harder, and because he could have thrown some international intelligence interests under the bus there. I mean, for goodness sake, man, you just closed down, USAID and NED. They are involved in what you're talking about right here. What about the NATO, Atlantic Council Digital Forensics Lab? You know what I mean? Like, there's certain cul-de-sacs and right and left turns that could and should have been taken in that talk there. That could have been a major, something that would have me more excited than I am. It's like, yeah, I agree with everything he said. But there's 1, 2, and 3 steps further. You could have taken that to really send the message. So, of course, I'm not surprised that wasn't, didn't go down that way. But, there's a lot more there. There's a lot of open goals sitting there that you could have kicked, man.
Yeah, and I agree, Hesher, and actually, Thomas Fassi writes for Unheard. He wrote a really good piece on this. We'll talk about that in a moment because it expands a little bit. But Ruckus, what are your initial reactions on Vance?
Well, I think that the jury is still out as to how the censorship battle is going here on the home front. So I would have liked us to wrap that up here first and make an example and show the world, hey, here's how you don't censor your people. But we're still dealing with that. We're making a law about anti-Semitism comments. We just witnessed accounts on X getting nuked, not the least of which was Ye, or Kanye West, of course, for his merchandise thing that he did, which with the little symbol on the shirt, the one, if I'm not mistaken, most of those went to the Azov battalion to help them out with their efforts. But we don't have the leg to stand on just yet to be reprimanding others about their level of censorship. Let's get that fixed at home first and then show them, hey, look, if we can do it, you can do it too. So I found it very tone deaf that he was leading with this whole censorship thing, but that was my observation.
Yeah. So we'll go back to Vance here, bring him back up again. So now this is the big ticket item here. We talked a little bit about the defense spending. By the way, you guys kind of know how this is going. If the U.S. is pushing, I mean, to go from 2% of GDP to 5% of GDP, that's a huge amount of money. And it's so this is Trump expecting them to settle at 3, right? That's kind of like what it is, or at the very least 2. I think there's a number of NATO member states that don't spend that, but they can't afford it. They're all broke, and they're broke because of this Ukraine war. And they're broke because of have to throw this up on screen because of that. Not a word about this. This didn't get talked about at all. I can't believe what a bunch of cucks. Europe, I mean, they're just pathetic. They just grovel And nobody wants to. Why doesn't anybody want to talk about Nord Stream? Well, probably because they've all got their dirty little hands in this NATO operation, and so it's hilarious. But by blaming it on the Ukrainians, they've sort of temporarily give themselves a stay of execution on the matter. But I just find that to be hilarious. But so immigration is the big ticket item, and so here's Vance on the immigration issue. I've got some comments. I'm sure you do, as does I think Thomas Fassi as well. But here's this bit.
And of all the pressing challenges that the nations represented here face, I believe there is nothing more urgent than mass migration. Today, almost 1 in 5 people living in this country moved here from abroad. That is, of course, an all-time high. It's a similar number, by the way, in the United States, also an all-time high. The number of immigrants who entered the EU from non-EU countries doubled between 2021 and 2022 alone, and of course, it's gotten much higher since. And we know this situation, it didn't materialize in a vacuum. It's the result of a series of conscious decisions made by politicians all over the continent and others across the world over the span of a decade. We saw the horrors wrought by these decisions yesterday in this very city.
We'll stop there, guys, and just talk about the immigration issue, okay? My take on this is that, and of course, my take is very controversial to some people. Certainly, I'm talking right over the heads, just a, explicit disclaimer. I am talking right over the heads of Tommy Robinson supporters. You will not get what I'm saying here, but that's okay. Just go to the bar and get a pint and come back in about 5 minutes. Most of the migrant flows into Europe are coming from sub-Saharan Africa, and through Libya, okay, and Sudan. So those are two situations where there was intentional destabilization. Libya, obviously, NATO policy, U.S.-led NATO policy to destroy Libya. That was the sort of safety valve for immigration into Europe, blown basically by NATO. Nobody wants to take responsibility for this, not the French, who are also there, not the British, who are also riding shotgun, and the Norwegians, who flew a lot of air sorties during the Libya bombing. Other one is Syria, massive multi-billion-dollar proxy war, U.S.-led, NATO-led. Turkey, NATO member. Okay, don't need to explain anymore. Afghanistan, NATO. So all the Afghan refugees in the last 3 years, floods of them. That's a NATO situation. Uzbekistan and the neighboring stands destabilized. They're flowing in as well. So 3 major inflows of refugees or migrants into Europe from 3 NATO flashpoints. Arguably, the CIA has been destabilizing Sudan for the last 20 years. Okay. And they even split it. They partitioned it. That's how bad it got. So why can't we have a conversation in Europe about, with all these NATO members here at the Munich Security Conference, that lo and behold, is it possible? Is it even possible? Guys, just, I'm dreamscaping here. But is it possible that NATO policy could have some effect on the migrant crisis? Or am I just an absolute crazed conspiracy theorist?
Very possible, and we could argue the same thing here in the United States, right? Like having to flee parts of sub-Saharan Africa, like if you're going through Libya and Sudan, that sounds like a pretty dangerous route to me. So very similar, people trying to flee places like Venezuela, or elsewhere in South and Central America to come to the United States. Like, yeah, of course. I mean, it feels very familiar. Yet you're right. There's no discussion about the intentional destabilization of these places, and how that plays into this. It's like, that's apparently verboten to discuss in those circles because it plays a huge role.
Ruckus, you have any comment on this one?
I thought we all agreed this was unprovoked mass migration.
Migration unprovoked by choice.
It's interesting that he said the thing that a lot of us commentators have been saying about other events of recent history, that these things do not start in a vacuum. Why is that concept lost on these people when it comes to other parts of the world? But he's happy to understand how the world really works when he's standing there on stage talking about this particular issue of migration. So at least, again, he's saying all the right things. You mentioned that on the X Space last night, Patrick. I mean, there's really nothing wrong in general with what he's saying. We can all get behind it and agree with it, but I think it's kind of lost on his audience. I had mentioned on the X Space, who is he talking to? Is he really talking to the people in that room, or is he talking to us? I don't, it makes no sense.
Yeah, that's a good point. I remember when you brought this up, it was a great point, Ruckus, because what we were talking about, Hesher, was that whoever wrote this speech for Vance had in mind the viral clips that will come out of it and go on to, X and conservative media, the Zingers, basically. That was the title of our space, JD Vance's Zingers. And so that this is how communication and consensus building is done now these days. It's viral sound bites on video that will go on Instagram, TikTok, X, and other social media platforms. And that's what circulates, and it gets embedded in mainstream articles. Fox News uses the same clips as well. They see what the metrics are on some of these Zingers, and they're like, oh, that one's got 10 million views. We're going to lead with that one. So it's interesting how new media works with digital media is working with politics, consensus building, talking points. There's some different mechanics these days. And that's what I'm kind of interested in watching this process, because it seemed like the speech didn't have continuity. It was kind of like a wandering speech. It's kind of like 5 different chapters in his speech. And it's almost like he had the sound bites pre-written, baked into the speech. I don't know if you guys.
I think you're right. It makes me think of when Trump did his video conference into the World Economic Forum. It was like, what is this? I feel like this is not for the people in the room. That was my first thought. Was like, wow, this is highly prepared, and it's a lot of this is just I use the metaphor often of stroking the head of the dog, right? Like we're stroking the head of social media here, conservative social media, because it makes great sound bites. All 5 of those chapters can be have the best part pulled out for a 3 to 5 minute clip on whatever YouTube channel, Forbes or whatnot, and they'll go big. So and there's not just a power politics angle to that. There is a raw social media angle. You know what I mean? A metrics driven social media angle that actually brings straight up money into the account holders. So they're able to monetize stuff like that if it's written in a way where the Western audience is going to absorb it in small sound bites and feel good. You know what I mean? And
oh yeah,
there's a lot to feel good about right now. I have to eat my words a little bit about Doge. They're actually doing a lot of things that I completely support. So, it's like, it's really easy to have your head patted, to be that German Shepherd sitting there and I just need a head pat, I need a snacky poo and a head pat and I'm cool, all the while, things are being monetized left and right. We're seeing talking points that, that might, entertain us here at home or satisfy us here at home being used in places that don't make sense, like the World Economic Forum and the Munich Security Council. And that's why you're not going to see them go deep dive on a lot of these things, like I was complaining about before with that first segment of his clip.
Yeah, I mean, look, honestly, as in media, we do chop up segments. We pre-weave the bigger segment into for smaller cut ups afterwards. I mean, but we're in media, we're not in politics. So it's like politics and media have converged now completely. And let me just let me see, this bit is interesting. And we're going to go to break after this. And on the other side, we're going to connect Basil Valentine. Is going to be joining us in overtime. But this is an interesting bit, you guys. You'll know where I'm going here.
Guilty of thought crime. In Britain and across Europe, free speech, I fear, is in retreat. And in the interest of comedy, my friends, but also in the interest of truth, I will admit that sometimes the loudest voices for censorship have come not from within Europe, but from within my own country, where the prior administration threatened and bullied social media companies to censor so-called misinformation. Misinformation like, for example, the idea that coronavirus had likely leaked from a laboratory in China. Our own government encouraged private companies to silence people who dared to utter what turned out to be an obvious truth.
Hold on for a minute. Stop.
Don't
it right
NLP me, bro.
Do you see, saying all the right things, you guys? And then so he says, the vice president of the United States saying it's an absolute truth that a coronavirus leapt out of the Wuhan labs and did a few laps around the planet in 14 days. I mean, so like, who's running? Who wrote this speech? Was it Cat Turd? Was it Ian Miles Chong or Robert F. Kennedy Jr.? I mean, so it's a lab leak promotion. So the CIA is running with the lab leak. So what's all this? Oh, we're against the deep state BS, because he's parroting deep state talking points. I mean, I thought that could have just been left out, you guys. But the fact that it was included like that, I have no idea what to say at this point.
I had guessed that AI was involved in helping him write the speech, and I believe that even more firmly today than I did last night on the X Space looking at it. I would like to take the transcript of the speech and feed it into one of these AI programs and ask it, what is the probability that this speech was written by AI? And I think I might be onto something.
So what do you think about that, Hesher? Lab leak, it's the absolute God's honest truth, says JD Vance.
Embarrassing, shameful. I'm so sick of seeing the lab leak being the cherry on top of a statement from a mainstream conservative at this point. You're feckless know nothing. I'm sorry. Sorry. I mean, maybe you just don't know, maybe you just don't understand, but even if you haven't taken the time to look into the many shadows of doubt that have been cast on gain of function or lab leaks and this and that, you have no business telling people that it's an obvious fact that happened. It is not an obvious fact. And you can go back and listen to 2.5 years of Sunday Wire, Boiler Room, TNT broadcasts. If you
UK column.
Yeah, UK column. Our friend Alex Zek. I mean, that's really the true omnibus of information on this, the end of COVID.com.
Yep.
So, but I'm not surprised. I'm just sick of hearing it. I'm sick of hearing blah blah politics, right-wing politics, and lab leak. Boom. Like that's your mic drop. Lab leak is your mic drop. You do realize when you do the lab leak mic drop and cherry on top that you're promoting more of this. You're asking for more pandemic industrial complex. You're asking for more lockdowns. You're asking for more mRNA shots. You're asking for more social distancing or whatever you're basically simping for Bill Gates. Okay. So if you're doing lab gates, you're simping for Bill Gates, you're simping for Pfizer, you're simping for Moderna. You are a whore. You are a whore for sale for big pharma and for global governance and for authoritarianism, pandemic, industrial complex tyranny. That's all there is to it. So, has been and will remain one of my biggest complaints about the politicization of health, especially when it comes to conservatives, because you mainstream conservatives were hiding in your houses like everyone else and allowing people to run roughshod over our country, over our world, hiding? You know, like where were you? Were you in Jordan Peterson's little heroin den? Were you doing OxyContin with Jordan B. Peterson or something? You just couldn't raise your fucking head out of the clouds and say, wait a minute, no, we have a constitution here. You can't do these things. I don't care if there's an unexplained illness that I don't understand. You know what I mean? None of that. And then when it becomes okay to talk about politically, you want to come out and you want to do Chinese lab leak. You want to do, you know, where were you when we were talking about bio labs all over the planet that were funded with our tax dollars back in 2018, 2017, 2019? Where were you when we were doing Sunday Wire with Miss Gitanyeva, right? Did you read those reports? Have you been at 21stcenturywire.com reading those reports? No, clearly, no, you don't care. If you,
and it wasn't trendy. It wasn't trendy. It wasn't a popular talking point. So because Facebook suppressed lab leak posts for 2 months, that's like evidence that somehow there was a lab leak. But let me tell you something, and this is the truth, that lab leak, the Wuhan lab leak, is the mainstream CIA-backed conspiracy theory. That is the official conspiracy theory of the U.S. government now. JD Vance just put it right on there. And nailed his colors to the mast. If I put out that there was no SARS-CoV-2, no novel virus in Wuhan, there's no evidence for it other than a computer-modeled genomic sequence from the Chinese CDC from one patient in Wuhan, and that was sent to America and to Italy and to the UK, and they used that to calibrate the PCR test for SARS-CoV-2. Never a biological sample produced. If I say that, I get censored. I get my account shut down on YouTube twice. Everybody try it. Sam Bailey, Dr. Sam Bailey's not on YouTube. She is censored. The most censored position on social media is no virus or the skepticism of a novel SARS-CoV-2 virus. Lab leak, you can talk about all you want. So what on earth is all this talk about? So I'm telling you, these people are too much. So, and by the way, just we mentioned Thomas Fassi, great piece here on Unheard. He basically pointed out that on the Romanian elections, the US were the first person to basically throw shade on that election, and that emboldened the Europeans to then annul it. Okay, so it was US first. And on the censorship issue, and Vance slightly alluded to this, but not enough. It was U.S. tech firms and U.S. government and U.S. government-funded quangos that have pressured Europe to censor. Okay, so all of this stuff is coming from the U.S. And I know it's a different administration, but you know the right thing to do is to say we are responsible for all of these things. This is a new team now. When we repudiate the Biden administration and everything they did. But we're not going to do this going forward. Like, he didn't make that clear enough. Instead, he browbeated the Europeans as if it was all their idea, and it was clearly coming from the U.S. And Thomas Fassi basically has all the receipts in this article, and it's a very, very good piece. You know, Thomas is a great he's a very fair, even-handed political analyst, and he's a good journalist. So this is a great piece here. But I'm saving the best for last, you guys, okay? I'm saving the best for last. And here's JD Vance. And let me see if I've got yes, I do have the cue right on this. And we're going to go to break after this. So I'll get comment on this and then we'll go out to break. But listen closely to this.
Migration. Today, almost 1 in 5 people living in this country moved here from abroad. That is, of course, an all-time high. It's a similar number, by the way, in the United States, also an all-time high. The number of immigrants who entered the EU from non-EU countries doubled between 2021 and 2022 alone. And of course, it's gotten much higher since. And we know this situation, it didn't materialize in a vacuum. It's the result of a series of conscious decisions made by politicians all over the continent and others across the world over the span of a decade. We saw the horrors wrought by these decisions yesterday in this very city. And of course, I can't bring it up again without thinking about the terrible victims who had a beautiful winter day in Munich ruined. Our thoughts and prayers are with them and will remain with them. But why did this happen in the first place? It's a terrible story, but it's one we've heard way too many times in Europe and unfortunately too many times in the United States as well. An asylum seeker, often a young man in his mid-20s, already known to police, rams a car into a crowd and shatters a community. How many times must we suffer these appalling setbacks before we change course and take our shared civilization in a new direction?
I can't agree more, you guys. How many times do we have to see this script run? A disheveled Muslim youth, known by the security services, a known wolf on the radar, does some crazy act of, quote, domestic terrorism. Okay, how many times do we have to suffer this narrative? Well, just read Trevor Aronson's book, The Terror Factory, Inside the FBI's Manufactured War on Terrorism, to know that all of these high-profile domestic terror events have some security services, informants, dupes, patsies, and other useful idiots always involved. That's why they're, quote, on the radar of the security services. So here's JD Vance basically throwing a solid to the Daily Shooter, guys. I don't know what to say.
How many times? I can answer that question. Infinite times. This will happen infinite times because this is how they control humanity. This is how they shape society. False flag after false flag after false flag after stagecraft after statecraft after more false flag. They're going to keep doing it and doing it and doing it because apparently as citizens we cannot seem to come to grips and terms with the fact that we live in a giant MK Ultra factory, a giant closed loop of feedbacks that will consistently rely on these sort of narratives that Trevor Aronson talks about in The Terror Factory and that we've talked about here in real time every time we see one of these. Yeah, we're not saying these things are fake. We're not saying no one died for the noobs out there. We're saying sometimes things happen and governments and security agencies will get in there and tell you that something different happened. And sometimes governments and security agencies and FBIs and CIAs and MI5s and Mossads will make things happen, or they will entrap people into doing things. And then the narrative comes around. And then 70 years later, you're still trying to figure out, well, who killed JFK? Can I have some more documents that are heavily redacted, please, so I can think about this for another 40 years? Can we just keep doing this? You know, we'll tell the people, oh, we live in the modern age. Welcome to the 21st century. We're protecting democracy. We're protecting your health. We're protecting marginalized people. Bullshit, you are. Bullshit. You guys are doing false flags. You're doing statecraft. You're doing stagecraft. You're messing with the financial system. You're doing cultural engineering and then telling us that these things didn't happen in a vacuum. We got solutions for it, but we certainly don't want to talk about the actual problems that led to it. So the answer to your question, JD Vance, is the beating shall persist. Okay, the beating shall persist, and morale will not get any better as long as you allow these security agencies and frauds in these three-letter agencies and the military-industrial complex and your donors to keep writing these silly plots.
I can't agree more. Ruckus, your comments before we go to break.
What exactly is our shared civilization? That was a new one on me. I've never heard anyone use that term before. So that stands out.
He's kind of talking. It was kind of, he said he was doing an anti-Muslim thing without saying Muslims. Basically.
I wasn't going to say it. Well, that's the other thing. It's like it's implied that all of these events that don't happen in a vacuum are somehow tied to an extreme ideology, which almost always, certainly 9 out of 10 times at least, is related to the Muslim thing. So yeah, terror.
So
just furthers an agenda, of course. Sorry.
It's the clash of civilizations narrative. So like we're still stuck with this after 9/11.
It's us versus them. See,
that's right. It's us versus the terrorists. You're either on our side or you're on the side of the terrorists. Said famously George W. Bush, the great philosopher king. We miss him so much. Anyway, we're gonna go. So anyway, I just thought I'd drop that Daily Shooter script on you guys, and I'm really impressed. JD had his marks on that. Perfect. That's a perfect Daily Shooter script. I mean, I'm in awe. I'm absolutely impressed that he. So they expect more false flags, guys. That's all I can say. Because if he's eating this up, these dodgy, fake German, unbelievable stories and all these crazy Christmas market vehicle ramming crowds and all this other crazy stuff. And it's always on the radar of the security. Oh, we knew about them. But the reason we didn't apprehend them because we're just short on man and funding. We need more resources. That'll be the solution. We need to ramp up spending on security. That'll do it. So they need a DHS in Europe. We need a Department of Homeland Security in Europe. So that's what Trump will probably say next. Anyway, we're going to go to Overdrive right now. I'm here with the team from ACR, co-host Bryan McClain, a.k.a. Hesher, and Ruckus, Adam Clark. We're going to be joined in the Overdrive by none other than Basil Valentine. He's waiting in the bullpen, throwing fastballs like Raleigh fingers, getting warmed up for the Overdrive segment. So look forward to hearing from Basil about a whole host of things. We may talk about the JFK, Epstein 9/11 files, and also Elon Musk's latest love child. Conservative values for everybody. I can't wait. A lot to look forward to on the other side. Stay with us, folks. We will be right back after some music from our friends, Red Rumble.